All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you all for attending another LinkedIn Live, sponsored by Optiv, the cybersecurity solutions and advisory leader. Today, we are here in LinkedIn Live on this platform because this is our network. This is where we exist. I don't know, most people in cyber always have LinkedIn at least scrolling casually, and we want to bring this data to you here in this format. As a part of that, please participate. We have the chat window open. We are monitoring it, and we'll be fielding questions from here. If you guys got questions on trends, on things that are happening, please ping us. My name is Sean Tufts. I'm a managing partner here at Optiv, focused on critical infrastructure. Here with me today is Jessica Hetrick, VP of Services for Optiv ClearShark, our federal division. With almost a decade in operations from the FBI to the private sector and now running services for our ClearShark group, and then myself sitting in the critical infrastructure side, working with clients every day, we're going to be talking about trends. We're counting down. We have less than 45 days left in the year, which means we need to start flipping that calendar and looking at 2025. And we don't want to rush it. We want to be preparing for security posture changes. We want to be preparing for how to focus our budgets. So we're here to talk today about what we see coming from our seats. With that being said, let's jump into it. Jessica, you've been kind of everywhere, right?
I've been a lot of places, Sean.
What are you seeing from the federal side as trends that are coming up in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of consistency with what we've seen in 2024 and even in 2023. And I think we're also going to see a lot of advancement. And we'll talk a lot about the AI stuff later on in this conversation. But across the industry, I expect that we're probably going to see a continuation of social engineering, maybe even like a resurgence of the ransomware as a service piece, because cyber criminals are looking to leverage and rent their tools. We're going to see kind of a corporatized approach to ransomware as a service. We'll see that kind of come back into play. But obviously, it's those easy access points, the social engineering, the phishing emails, the deep fakes. Those are going to continue to evolve and help gain access into different networks. We'll see AI also feed heavily the creation of social engineering campaigns and probably the enhancement of those. We saw that a lot around the election. And so I think we're going to continue to see that. Talking specifically about AI and ML, I think that's going to continue to be a massive wave as we move forward. Obviously, we saw the National Security Memorandum come out from the White House today. DHS released recommendations and outlined how to securely develop and deploy AI. I think we're going to see AI become a very important piece that integrates across all of the cybersecurity landscape going forward. I think we'll continue to see the cybersecurity skills gap this year, maybe broaden, deepen, and shift given the AI trends. I think the job count was close to 4 million worldwide in just the cybersecurity space, given, I think that was a World Economic Forum report that I read somewhere, some crazy stats, like 4 million jobs. So I think that we're going to need to continue to address that skills gap and look for ways to onboard different people from a basic level and help train them as we move forward to help shift that gap. The public-private sector cooperation and partnership needs to continue to advance. I think we're going to see that continue. But I also think, as you kind of think more about the threat space, I think we're going to keep seeing the cloud-based threats, the risk of the insider threats. I think you'll see the zero trust approach be very significant still across industry, obviously very centered around the federal space, just given all of the push around zero trust there. But really, as it ties to the OT and the IoT space, I think that's really an untapped threat space that we're going to see a surge of targeting in. And I think it could be enhanced even with the AI and ML stuff. So it kind of all ties together. But when we're looking at the IoT and OT space, I know this is like your area of your favorite area. Let's be honest, it's your favorite area. What are you seeing in that space that people and organizations need to be keeping in mind for 2025? I think that's going to be a really important topic as we move into 2025.
Yeah, totally. Connecting the two trends of the cybersecurity workforce and critical infrastructure. I met a guy the other day he just graduated from the University of North Texas. That's what it was. And he had a cybersecurity in OT expertise, and he was going to work at a major corporation in the food and bev space to go solve that. And I told him, I said, hey, you're the first person that's been born and educated to do this. Everyone else has been either retrofitting somebody from critical infrastructure or somebody from cyber, and those conversations don't always go. The thing that makes our grid run is not the thing that makes our SOC run. Those are two different skill sets. We have to start combining those together. So that piece and part is going to be critical as we start staffing up and people into these environments. So the trends we see in the critical infrastructure side, I think we're still recovering from Colonial. And what I mean by that is we have historically secured our oil companies and our utilities at a greater degree. We've always had great cybersecurity fundamentals there and binding regulations, advice from government, all the good stuff that we want. What we saw from Colonial was a big growth in things that wouldn't be considered acts of war, meaning we don't go after, or threat actors are not pursuing groups that are contained inside of borders, meaning if it's one country, they're going to avoid it. So it's a lot of our pipeline companies, that's a lot of our utilities. Utilities operate mostly within state boundaries. So going after them, when we did that once, it looked and felt like a declaration of war. So what our threat actors have done, they know that. They don't want to be under the thumb of the White House or the Pentagon. They've branched out and they've gone to multi-jurisdictional capabilities. So they're looking at global food companies. They're looking at global logistics firms. They're looking at the airline industry because it's not really an act of war at that point. So we've really broadened out. If you track that with what we saw early in the year coming out of China with Volt Typhoon, that was a custom malware package that was built to be slow and low. They were only looking for reconnaissance. Someone might correct me on this, but there were some pieces and parts of that malware campaign that weren't focused on smash and grab ransomware. They were focused on intelligence gathering. So I think that freaked a lot of people out. The last piece that we really saw grow was the effects in critical infrastructure in a kinetic theater. So transferring oceans, I guess we're going over to the Ukraine for a minute. We're talking about what they're doing in the current war cycles, and they're attacking GPS. I didn't know this. Someone told me this the other day. There's only like 32 GPS satellites out there, and Starlink has 600 by comparison. So what we're seeing in that phase of war is them going after our GPS signals to attack our ability to protect our grid. The grid is heavily dependent on time. Time is dependent on the synchronization from GPS. And you can easily knock a GPS signal out. So those pieces and parts and understanding where these interlocking soft targets are in our critical infrastructure have gone hand in hand for this year. And learning how we can kick out the people who are looking for reconnaissance, as well as protect ourselves from kinetic warfare. So those two pieces and parts have been really, really trending in a positive direction. And I think all of that comes back to like, where are our boundaries? And what are we actually declaring as our edge? Where do we want to be protecting? Where does that look? And I think we mentioned zero trust. I think that was the third buzzword for the day, AI and zero trust. That's all. And Jessica, maybe you see this differently. Those are the two biggest pieces we're talking to our boards, we're talking to our CISOs about. Those two pieces and parts have been really, really hot still. Is that what you've been seeing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the attitude towards zero trust is it's not just a buzzword either anymore. I think it's becoming really important across agencies, across different organizations, that we not only adopt the best practices, adopt the principles, but more importantly, as you're saying, make sure that we're going beyond traditional perimeter security to focus on identity verification, to identify access control points of weakness and solve for those. I mean, back in July, the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, mandated that agencies submit their updated zero trust implementation plans to document current target maturities, identify high value assets, and make sure that we have a plan in place across information systems. We saw big growth in the microsegmentation push. I think clients ultimately, though, they can really struggle with the basics of zero trust. And so when we talk about the basics, we're talking about inventory of users and critical assets, strategies for remote access, making sure that we have third parties and contractors removing too much access, right? Limiting the access where necessary to reduce that third party risk, and integrating controls to really produce output that helps us make informed decisions. There's also obviously the challenge with like network architecture and other things, especially that we're observing in the OT and IoT space, like you were calling out. And so the outcome is really, the goal is to obviously shrink how bad actors can laterally move. And that's one of like the key pillars in Zero Trust. And so Zero Trust is, I think, is really becoming the standard. Both federal and commercial entities will consider Zero Trust, I think, in 2025 and beyond. I think a lot of them are already doing this, but I think it's going to be considered the principle behind most decisions that are made for organizations. And so the Zero Trust space specifically is, call it just like the centerstone pillar of how we progress against cybersecurity. But I think it's going to be crucial with the federal sector, especially going into 2025, that you follow the different plans to build the right process behind Zero Trust. I mean, the National Telecommunications Advisory Committee, they came out with their approach. I think there's 5 steps in it. I'm not the Zero Trust expert. We have one of those, but there's a 5-step process that in terms of how you think about the use cases around Zero Trust. And I think it's important that organizations start to leverage frameworks like that to really launch off of like kind of the Zero Trust space. But when you think about all of these different elements kind of coming together, I noticed a great question from Dan in the chat that I want to make sure to hit on for you, Sean. Like when we're gonna go back to AI, so let's shift to AI right now. Like, how is AI helping IoT and OT? Like, what are your takes on AI in the industry? And then, of course, happy to share mine too.
Yeah, it's a place where people are scared. I think what we've seen from the AI trend is that we're not making the mistakes we did on cloud. When we started going to cloud-first environments, people just put a bunch of their data in a bucket somewhere and said, hey, we got it. We moved that workload over here. It's going to be safe because we've got this big brand behind it securing it. And what we realized was, well, that wasn't really true. We had to build competent controls around it. So AI and critical infrastructure, I think people have been a lot slower to just open the funnel, which is good. I think we learned from that mistake in the 2015 to 2022 timeline. So we've learned not to just open the funnel and let people run amok. So people have been really slow to put their secrets inside of it. I think thankfully we saw a couple missteps by like Panasonic in the early days of ChatGPT where people were loading their proprietary data into these tools, and that was a mistake. So we've seen a lot more hesitant, just a lot of people worried about it. And it's actually picked up the DLP programming again. Maybe not from like a DLP for DLP's sake, but really understanding, and you mentioned crown jewels, right? Finding out which data we really, really care about, whether it's our employees' social security numbers or it's our proprietary formulas, if it's our ways we do business, oil plays we're going after. All of those pieces and parts are becoming more focused, and we're putting less focus on the data we know isn't all that important. So that's been the rise we've seen, a lot of hesitation. I think AI and critical infrastructure specifically, I think we're going to see people start to figure out how to do things better and faster. We know our operators are wanting to use that and not be reliant on old school ways of thinking. We talked about the workforce earlier. A lot of the people that built our infrastructure in the US, our highways, our power lines, our sewer systems, a lot of them are retiring, and they're leaving the keys to the US kingdom to some people who want modern tooling. Windows XP, Windows 98 are still very much alive in our critical infrastructure. So as those people tag in to the workforce, they're not wanting to operate on those systems. We want to be better and we want to be faster, and we know we can do it. So that's the other piece. I think both of those things are coming alive. They're starting to come into the fold. And that's been really, really fun to see, and also terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, I think from the AI and ML perspective, when we think about organizations in 2025, AI is going to as much help defenses as it will help offenses, right? And I think it's important to know that you can enhance your cyber defenses with AI and ML strategies. To your point, like, people want faster results, and so AI and ML will play a larger role in detecting and responding to events, and even automating some of that response. We're going to see it to do probably some even maybe advanced threat hunting in some places where organizations are really looking to push the needle, creating some automation around that. And also at the same time create more sophistication around the attacks, right? We saw some really, really, really well done campaigns around the election, very sophisticated messaging, some not so sophisticated, some like glaringly obvious, but others that were very, very well done. And so we're going to see cyber criminals also use AI in that way and leverage it to target attacks in different ways, to create new ways to navigate the defenses. We'll see, I think, AI and ML be really prevalent in both the offensive and the defensive areas. And I mean, going back to that notion of pushing the needle, yeah, I think there was a jump out the gate that kind of freaked out some people. But now we're starting to see, like, the White House released that national security memorandum looking to advance the U.S. in terms of AI and how to achieve national security objectives. And so overall, that signified and really kind of messaged to the industry broadly that we are willing to go there, which does keep us, I would say, competitive across industries and competitive across nations. And I think it's an important piece, but not really the focus. The focus is how do we advance and how do we innovate? And we have to be cognizant that as we advance and we innovate, we also, the cyber criminals are leveraging it the same way. And so I think it's really kind of the two sides of the same coin, if you will. I think it's going to make things easier, but it's also going to open up more doors. And so I think we have to be really, really mindful of that as we kind of go into 25.
Oh, yesterday we were in a boardroom and a CIO was there with the CISO and the whole security staff and said, "Hey, which large language model should we use?" And I said, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. And she kind of looked at me crossways and was like, "Aren't you here to help us pick that?" And I said, "No, we're here to help you build governance, because if you're worried about which tool you pick, before you worried about how your people are going to use it, what business use cases we want to see, then we've got the whole thing wrong and backward." So we want to be facing and pushing into the environment. When we talk about pragmatism, be slow. It's okay. We'll get there. And I would rather make a mistake by being too slow than make a mistake by being too fast. And then really build out that structure of what do we care about? Why are we using this tool? Because we know that wide open funnel piece doesn't work. So really focused on those use cases. It's funny, I actually talked to our group that's doing that for Optiv, right? We're not immune to the pressures of AI. And there was a really big fight over Grammarly. Grammarly was built and used by people like me who can't spell things. But now it's a big AI model. So now we have to worry about what are we putting into it, right? We can't put too much. Obviously, outlawing its use entirely is a weird business practice. So finding what that model looks like, so where we can do that. So that piece to me has been really fun to watch corporations really be pragmatic for the first time in cyber's history.
Yeah. So that leads me to, I'd say, like, my final question for you, and I know we're going to answer some questions. I see some more coming in the chat. So guys, keep up the questions. We're excited to answer and address any that we can. But Sean, what is the most important things that should be top of mind for organizations as we move into 25? Obviously, like at the start, you said we're not quite there yet, but we really need to be thinking about preparing for that. So what other things should be top of mind for anyone listening out there?
And I'd love for the chat to weigh in here, what trends they're thinking about and pressures and worries. It is filling up, which is cool to see. To me, it's always a focus on fundamentals. We have to be very cautious that while we have our eye on the future, we aren't forgetting the present. Doing simple things like a basic firewall audit once a year, finding those any rules that have been built in, doing the fundamentals. And I think from my seat, when I see fundamentals, I think we can do a lot more around integrations today. Everybody has their big platforms they want to use, right? Their big firewall platforms, their big SIM platforms. But how many of them are truly talking ecosystem and funneling all this data to the right location so that our tier one analysts, our SOC operators, they can use it and use it right, which has been really valuable. We were the client and they had fully supported teams for network, security, identity, and those teams didn't talk. They were mad at each other and they used their little political tool fighting to get in the way of their security integrations. And that was causing a big gap in the industry or in the environment. So finding ways to really do the fundamentals correctly before we start forward casting into everything else is still, I think, for me, a major trend for the next year. Does that match with what you see in the federal side?
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, I think the The other piece that is going to be big in, I wouldn't just say 2025, but I think big going forward for organizations is really the tech rationalization piece. We're seeing a lot in the federal space. Like, obviously, the federal government has budget, right? Like that's to some extent going to exist with obviously continuing resolutions and maybe when the budget passes. But the reality is tech rationalization is not a passing fad. I think it's going to be big for organizations going forward. CISOs, cybersecurity professionals, buyers in the federal space, they're finding it necessary to make sure that the tech stack works and makes sense for the mission that they're going after. And so I think it's about creating, to your point, the efficient integrations, not customizations, but the integrations that can fulfill the use cases and requirements that the business has, right? Or the agency has. I think we're going to see an increase in tooling, but really a rationalization across all of the tooling that we have, right? And so you'll see organizations maybe go big in different areas, and driving the need and the desire to achieve the objective from the tools and make those tools really work for you, rather than just having a lot of tool sprawl, if you will. I think that's going to be another piece of it. And so, to your point, I think there's a lot of different compounding elements, but I think the technology that comes into play is going to be big too.
Yeah, we have a lot of clients who have 70, 120 cybersecurity tools, IT tools, cyber tools. At some point, the line's a little blurred. But that's just too much, right? Finding the place that you can really shrink that down and get the most, and then find those best of breeds. That's been a reliable strategy, and we're not getting any favors from our economy, right? There's crazy market signals that are saying, hey, things are going to go crazy. We're at the precipice of a brand new technology set, AI. We're also in a very condensed budgetary cycle. It's really interesting watching those two things crash into each other. So that's been really hard for a lot of our vendor companies, a lot of our clients to really figure out what that looks like. So I think that rationalization piece and figuring out which tools have value has been very, very potent for CISOs that want to work with their board well.
Yeah, and you said the word that had me thinking. How are boards going to start dealing with? Like, what are you seeing in the boardroom when it comes to dealing with cyber risk? How do you prioritize? Like, this is one of the questions that's coming up, but what are you seeing in that space? Obviously, you said you were in a boardroom yesterday. So talk a little bit more about that. Like, how are they starting to deal with cyber risk?
Boards have to be kind of nose in, fingers out. That was the rationale I heard yesterday, meaning they're going to start asking a very pointed questions. And I think they have the answers, especially around our buzzwords for today, Zero Trust and AI. They're going to be asking a lot of questions on what is the path. And I think they're looking back, and I don't think they know the path either, but they really want to see a strategic direction, one that is with the worker and the business use case in mind to go solve those problems. And then seeing what unlocks from the back end and how that actually portrays itself from an idea into a strategy, into a benefit for the worker, for the client, for the corporation. And I think watching people do that and who has the best kind of ideology around how to get that value unlocked is going to be the people that get their budgets released first. If you go in and kind of mutter and stare at your shoes and say, yeah, we're not really sure what to do there yet, we're waiting for others, those are going to be longer term plays. So I think it's a big game of chicken, honestly. I think the boards are posturing. I think the businesses are posturing, and those with the most strategic look are going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love the notion. I don't think I've heard it before of noses in, fingers out. I think we're having, because boards are becoming more and more educated around these subjects, we're seeing more and more trends of the call it the really intelligent, advanced follow-on questioning that's going on. It's no longer just a talk at you for whatever designated time the cybersecurity team is given. I think there's a lot more education at the board level, and so there's a lot more questions that are coming up, a lot more call it investigation into different areas and trends and topics and concerns. Right? I think that's an important thing too. And as I just want to make sure that we have time to address some of these questions. We have tons of great engagement today. But as we kind of transition to these questions, I'll start down with one of the questions from Warren. He wants to know if we agree clouds have backdoors, so much for Zero Trust, and as we promote AI and LLMs, that could create vulnerability. Sean, what's your take on that? Do you agree or disagree?
I mean, we don't know yet, right? There's all sorts of hallucinations and backdoors and things that are just scary that we haven't fully vetted out yet. I mean, this technology is still less than 18 months from its kind of launch onto the scene. I think even 12 months. So I don't think we know yet. So that's why there's a lot of hesitation behind putting your data fully inside of someone else's platform. That's still pretty scary, and finding out what that's going to do. I think we don't know yet. So I think the ones that are really going to be the safest, not saying the most business friendly, the ones that are going to be the safest are the ones that are hesitant. And I think finding and learning and keeping a really good monitoring on these environments.
Yeah.
I don't care what data you put into it, but you better know what data you put into it. So I think the groups that can answer those questions are gonna be the safest.
I think it goes to a notion that Brandon had put in a comment. Part of why AI is a great tool is because of the intelligence behind it. But in order to create that intelligence, you have to feed the right models and the right data into it, right? And so I think it's important to create the right frameworks to call it secure AI, for whatever that actually translates to. To Warren's question, I'll lean in and I would say that I would venture to agree with the notion that that's possible. Although to Sean's point, we don't fully know yet because we haven't fully seen it play out. But I think, again, AI, when you think about AI, you need to I think it's important to understand, at least, I think everyone needs to understand that there's the good and the bad that come with it, right? And so the bad will create vulnerability to some extent. So I would venture to say, from a hypothesis perspective, Warren, that I do agree that because we're promoting AI and LLMs into different systems, we're going to potentially create vulnerability.
Yeah, there's going to be. We don't know yet. So if you assume there's going to be a gap in that, then you better be careful how far you're willing to jump across that moat.
Totally agree. Question in here from David. Looks like, a question back actually to one of the comments that Brandon made. Buying 20 tools because disparate teams are all trying to solve their own problems without coordination leads to the overlaps that Sean mentioned. EDR fighting XDR and other issues. It's not fun watching two agents fight each other. This goes really to the tech rationalization piece. So David asks, is having EDR and XDR a little redundant, Sean?
If you're looking strictly at an acronym perspective, absolutely. If you're looking at, it all depends on your analysts, right? On what the people are doing. If there is data fighting and, hey, we think this is not an alert and we think this is an alert, and like that back and forth, that's pretty toxic. If we look at it as, hey, these are all signals to something we need to go research, I think that's really healthy. So whether or not you have 500 agents on a laptop, we all know we're going to get these systems crashing on each other. Fundamentally, putting those into one platform where you can do that right, ideally highly automated, ideally with as many signals as possible, we can get to a better system of truth. I do think if you have one team that is EDR and one team that is XDR, and they're going to fight over their acronym.
Yeah.
And
especially when they're not talking.
Yeah, and if you're fighting over your platform, then you're probably not doing the right thing by your company.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And then we did have an anonymous user type in, I think something we'll see is more AI generated vishing and phishing. Could not agree more. I think that is, we saw a massive wave before and during the election period for us. I think that's going to continue, not just from external bad actors, from actors in other countries, but from internal actors to the US too, because there is a lot of there's a lot of trend with it, and people are seeing these things. I saw something on social media the other day about the new administration and some like just crazy notion. So when I say all of these AI things have good and bad, I think the good is that we can potentially detect those things more often, but the bad is that they're going to get out there. And so people need to be taking a look at, to take a critical eye to every single notion that they see on social media, as intense as that actually sounds. You have to take a critical eye and you have to look, is this creating some emotional response out of me? Is this something majorly preposterous? Is this polarizing in any way? If that's the case, ask the question, like, is this real? Because some of the stuff that you're seeing online isn't anymore. And so ultimately it's important to really investigate some things. And yeah, that can be intense, especially when you're just mindlessly scrolling through things. But the social media platform
I'm not getting fished on.
Yes,
coming through via text message, my LinkedIn messages are just a bad place to go. um,
Yep.
Email's obviously been the same place over and over again, and that's always been present. So I think they're trying to get you multimodal. We had a phone call come through that was a phishing campaign, right? Trying to get me to go do something else. Thankfully, people's awareness is up that there is that piece out there, and I think there's a very much trust but verify. But it's getting more slick, and they can move faster and bigger. So I'm concerned on just the new models and less about the AI platform launching it, but more finding new ways to go capture you and new
Absolutely.
platforms to take advantage of.
All right, one final question for you, Sean, just because I love this question. What's the best part of your week so far? Austin wants to know.
Best part of my week so far has been LinkedIn Live. You know, I love that we get a chance to come out here and see people active in the chat and helping walk through what we see from trends, what we see from just the practitioners like us, and then also what our clients and what our community is saying.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm so distracted. These are such fun questions.
They're great
Small
questions.
language models. I haven't heard of a small language model before. That one's a first. I'm gonna have to research that one, Jessica.
See, soon our small languages. Yes, I agree with you, Warren. I think that will be a trend in 2025 as we advance in the AI space. SMLs will become part of it. I don't think we're going to see that massively adopted in the federal space initially. My personal take. I think that's something that follows on to like just initially, how do we develop and deploy AI in critical infrastructure like DHS is pushing out today? Like, I think we'll see baby steps through this process. Now, industry more broadly, I would argue we'll see them push the needle a little bit more in 2025. That's at least my take.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for being a part of this and for joining us in this conversation, prepping for 2025, putting that kind of eye to the future a little bit and making sure we're prepared for what our superiors are going to ask, what our employees are going to bring to us, and really working to get that risk lowered and capability increased. That's the goal. That's all we do in cyber. So the more we can keep our eye on that, the better off we'll be, our organizations will be, and our peer groups will be. So thank you all for joining. And yeah, we look forward to the next one. Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sean. Happy to be here.